you very much, and it'll be Senator Franken, Senator Whitehouse, and Senator Specter. Senator Franken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just pick up on the rape kit matter that both the Chairman and Senator Klobuchar brought up. And I think it's important for people to realize that this is pro-law enforcement, rape kit management. It puts criminals behind bars. It protects people are innocent, and brings victims closure and justice. In Hennepin County, Minnesota, one prosecutor has recently filed charges in 8 separate rape cases as a result of cold hits produced by cleaning up their backlog. And they've done this in New York, and it's also increased the number of convictions that they've gotten. I think they've gone from 40% to 70% of the convictions just because they increased the backlog. And I was just wondering, and maybe this is an answer you can't give me right now, but what's gone wrong with this? Because we had, we had this act, the Debbie Smith Rape Kit Reduction Law Act in 2004 with $500 million to address the problem, and we still have this problem. So it's just that we don't seem to have a regular system in place to specifically track rape kit backlogs around the country. And just can you tell me what you're doing about it? And if you don't have an answer right now, get back to me.
Well,
or us.
What I'd like to do is give you a more fulsome response, maybe in a written form, but to tell you that what you're talking about is exactly right, what you said in the early part of your comment. This is an ultimate law enforcement tool, and the ability to process these kits and then compare the results from those analysis to the databases that exist will, as you've indicated, solve cases and put people behind bars who are responsible for really heinous and very serious crimes. Exactly why the prior legislation, which was designed to avoid the very situation we find ourselves in.
Which, by the way, the Chairman was a great leader on.
I don't know why. It has not worked. But we in the department are trying to come up with ways in which we can work with our state and local partners to effectuate that act, and would look forward to working with you on this committee and in Congress, again, to identify why it hasn't worked as well as we thought in the past and how we can prevent that from happening in the future. But this is something that, for me, matters a great, great deal. I know you've devoted a lot of attention to this, but these are crimes that we can solve, and the inability to do that is extremely frustrating.
I'm going to get to just a macro issue here on the United States and crime and the number of people we have incarcerated. We have 5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's prisoners. And so many of these people are in for, because of drug addiction or mental health problems, and very many of these people have no history of anything violent or any even high-level drug activity. We're essentially sometimes sending kids who are in possession of drugs and sending them to crime school. We put them in prison, and then they learn from other criminals how to do crime, and 2/3 of them come back when they're released within 3 years. And more than 1/3 of the counties of Minnesota have drug courts that stop this cycle. These are special courts for non-violent drug offenders that steer them toward rehabilitation and treatment. And in Minnesota, offenders who use their drug courts are 10 times more likely to continue their treatment than other offenders. Can you tell us about drug courts, what they are, and what your department is doing to support them?
Well, we certainly have supported them in connection with the budgets that the President has proposed to increase the use of drug courts. I'm familiar with the one that we have here in Washington, D.C. that started, I guess, a little after I left the D.C. Superior Court and has proved to be, I think, very successful in dealing with people who are selling drugs because they are addicted to drugs. These are the low-level dealers, not the people
Sure.
who live in penthouses and drive big cars and all that. And so I think that drug courts are an effective way at getting at the problem, and their expansion is something that this administration supports. In terms of those macro issues that you were talking about, we have a sentencing group that is looking at a whole variety of issues now that I put together to look at that whole question of recidivism. I mean, are we doing the right things? I think we should ask ourselves, we should always be asking ourselves, is the criminal justice system that we have in place truly effective? And my thought is that we should have a data-driven analysis to see exactly who is in jail, are they in jail for appropriate amounts of time, is the amount of time they spend in jail a deterrent? Does that have an impact on the recidivism rate? And so this group will be reporting back to me, I hope, in the next couple of months, and it is on that basis that we'll be formulating policy and working with the committee with, I hope, some interesting and innovative ideas.
Well, and in doing that, might I suggest an increase in drug rehabilitation within prison? Because there are people in prison who are, a lot of people in prison who have addiction problems, who should be in prison, but are going to get out. And it'd be nice if, while they're in there, they got treatment. I just want to mention one thing on healthcare fraud, which is, I would like to see those people go to prison. I know I may be contradicting myself by saying we have too many people in prison. It seems like healthcare fraud folks might belong there more than people who are simply addicted to drugs. If I could quickly just touch on trafficking in women. It's just a subject I just want to touch on. I'm running out of time, but trafficking of Native American women is a big problem that I think is being ignored. And in international trafficking, there are women who are trafficked into this country for prostitution who, because some of these cases are sent to ICE, these women have a disincentive to report these crimes, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at.
That's an issue I think that is worthy of examination. We are paying particular attention to the plight of women on reservations. I was in Minnesota, I think about 3 or 4 weeks or so ago, for a listening conference. And if you look at the levels of violence that young girls and women are subjected to on the reservation, sometimes 10 times as high as national averages with regard to particular crimes, that is simply unacceptable in our country. And it is something that the President followed up on by having a listening conference at the White House. The international trafficking of women is something, and youngsters is something that we need to look at as well. And to the extent that ICE or their interaction with ICE somehow prevents us from being very effective in our enforcement efforts, I'll work with Secretary Napolitano, with members of the committee, to see if we can come up with ways in which we can be really effective in dealing with a problem that we have to get a handle on.
Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.